The invitation arrived in a gold envelope, and the moment I saw Vincent Sterling's name embossed at the bottom, I knew exactly what he was planning. He wanted to humiliate me. He wanted revenge for what happened at the restaurant, the night I supposedly ruined his expensive white shirt, the night he threw a napkin at my face and called me worthless in front of dozens of people. What Vincent didn't know, what nobody except my restaurant manager George knew, was that I owned La Perla. I wasn't just some clumsy waitress struggling to pay rent. I was Isabella Hartwell, owner of the Hartwell Investment Group, with a net worth of $2.3 billion. But I'd learned a long time ago that money reveals people's true character, and I was about to let Vincent Sterling reveal his in the most spectacular way possible. Before we dive deeper into this story, if you love tales of hidden identities, powerful comebacks, and karma coming full circle, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications. Trust me, this story has twists you won't see coming, and you don't want to miss a single moment. Now, let me take you back to where this all began, that Friday night at La Perla, the night Vincent Sterling made the biggest mistake of his life. It was a busy Friday evening, the kind where the restaurant hums with energy and every table is filled with guests dressed in their finest. La Perla was my pride and joy, an upscale restaurant that had taken years to build, but most people who dined there had no idea I was the one who owned it. I worked the floor regularly, serving tables, taking orders, clearing plates. My staff thought I was just another waitress, maybe a favorite of the manager. Only George knew the truth, and we'd kept it that way for 3 years. Why would a billionaire pretend to be a waitress? Simple. I grew up with nothing. I slept in shelters, wore donated clothes, went to bed hungry more nights than I care to remember. When I finally made my fortune through investments and smart business decisions, I promised myself I'd never forget where I came from. Working at La Perla kept me grounded. It reminded me that every person, regardless of their job or bank account, deserves dignity and respect. It also showed me people's true faces. How they treated someone they perceived as beneath them told me everything I needed to know about their character. That Friday night, Vincent Sterling walked through the door with 3 of his friends, all of them radiating the kind of arrogance that money without character produces. They were loud, snapping their fingers at the hostess, talking over each other about their latest luxury purchases. I watched from across the room as they were seated at table 12, right in the center of the dining area. George approached me with an apologetic look. "Isabella," he said quietly, using my first name like he always did when we were alone. "You don't have to take that table. I can assign someone else." I smiled at him. "It's fine, George. I've got it." I approached their table with my notepad ready, putting on the pleasant, professional demeanor that good service requires. Vincent barely glanced at me as he rattled off his order, his eyes fixed on his phone. His friends weren't much better, treating me like I was invisible furniture designed solely for their convenience. I took their orders without comment and returned to the kitchen, reminding myself that patience is a virtue and that most people eventually reveal who they really are. The main course came out perfectly: pan-seared salmon with asparagus and a delicate lemon butter sauce, one of our chef's specialties. I balanced the plates carefully as I approached table 12, navigating between other diners with the kind of practiced ease that comes from years of experience. I was setting down the first plate when Vincent suddenly pushed his chair back without looking, without warning, without a single thought for anyone around him. His chair hit my hip hard, and the plate I was holding tilted. The sauce splashed across his white designer shirt in an arc of golden butter and herbs. Time seemed to freeze. I saw the stains spreading across his chest, saw his face transform from casual indifference to absolute rage, saw his friend's eyes widen with that particular gleam people get when they're about to witness someone else's humiliation. Vincent shot to his feet, his chair clattering backward, his face turning red. "You clumsy idiot!" he shouted, his voice cutting through the gentle murmur of dinner conversation like a knife. "Look what you've done." The entire restaurant fell silent. Every conversation stopped. Every fork paused halfway to every mouth. All eyes turned to table 12, to Vincent Sterling standing there with sauce on his shirt, to me standing there with an empty plate in my hand. "Sir, I apologize," I began, but he cut me off. "Apologize?" He grabbed his napkin and threw it at my face. It hit my cheek and fell to the floor between us. "Do you know who I am? I could buy this entire restaurant. This shirt costs more than you make in 6 months, you worthless—" "Mr. Sterling," George rushed over, his face pale with panic. He knew who I was, and he knew I could end this scene with a single word, but he also knew I never did. "Sir, please, let me handle this. We'll cover your dry cleaning, I touched George's arm gently, stopping him mid-sentence. "It's okay, George." I looked directly at Vincent Sterling, meeting his furious gaze with complete calm. Something in my composure seemed to unnerve him slightly, like he'd expected me to cry or cower or beg for forgiveness. Instead, I stood there with my shoulders back and my head high, and I said in a clear, steady voice, "I sincerely apologize for the accident, sir. It was not intentional." "Accident?" One of his friends laughed. "People like you shouldn't be allowed to work in places like this. You don't have the coordination or the class." Another friend chimed in, "Vincent, you should sue. Teach her a lesson about her place in the world." Vincent sneered at me, leaning in close enough that I could smell his expensive cologne. "You'll be hearing from my lawyers, and I'll make sure you never work in this city again. People like you don't deserve to breathe the same air as people like us." He threw $200 bills on the table, not as payment for his meal, but as a dismissive gesture, like he was tossing coins to a beggar. Then he and his friends stormed toward the exit, their departure marked by loud complaints about the service, the staff, the declining quality of establishments that let just anyone work there. The entire restaurant remained silent until the door closed behind them. Then, slowly, the whispers began. But they weren't all what Vincent probably expected. Several guests approached me quietly, telling me they'd witnessed the whole thing and knew it wasn't my fault, that his chair had caused the accident. One older woman touched my hand and said, "You handled that with more grace than he deserved, dear." I smiled at her, thanked her, and continued my shift. George kept giving me worried looks, but I just shook my head. Later that night, after the restaurant closed, he found me in the office reviewing reservation books. "Miss Isabella," he said, "are you all right? I've never seen anyone treated so badly." "I'm fine, George." I looked up at him. "Vincent Sterling just showed me exactly who he is. That's valuable information." 3 days later, the gold envelope arrived at the restaurant, addressed to me in elegant calligraphy. I opened it during my break, standing in the same office where George and I had talked that night. The invitation was embossed with silver lettering, "Sterling Foundation Annual Charity Gala." Below the formal invitation text was a handwritten note in sharp, angular writing. "You made quite an impression. I'd love to see you there. V.S." George was with me when I opened it. His face went pale. "Miss Isabella, you can't possibly be considering this." "Why not?" "It's a trap. Everyone knows Vincent Sterling forgive me, but he invites regular people to his galas to mock them. It's entertainment for his crowd. He's done it before." I held the invitation up to the light, examining the expensive paper. "I know exactly what this is, George." "Then why would you go?" I smiled. "Because Vincent Sterling needs to learn a lesson, and I think it's time he learned it." That evening, sitting in my penthouse apartment overlooking the city, I called my assistant and told her to prepare the red Valentino gown, the one I'd bought in Paris last year and never had an occasion to wear, the one that cost more than most people's cars. Then I called my research team and had them compile everything they could find on Vincent Sterling. The information came back within hours. Vincent was the only son of Harold Sterling, a respected businessman who'd built the Sterling Empire through decades of hard work and ethical practices. Harold was known for his philanthropy and his fair treatment of employees. His son, however, was known for something quite different. Vincent ran a small division of the family business and spent most of his time at clubs, galas, and expensive restaurants. He'd been handed everything in life and earned nothing. Multiple former employees had complained about his treatment of them, but they'd all been quietly paid off. The charity galas he hosted were infamous in certain circles. He had a pattern of inviting service workers or people from modest backgrounds, then making them the butt of jokes for his wealthy friends' entertainment. But there was something else in the report, something interesting. Harold Sterling had recently been asking questions about his son's behavior. Several sources suggested the elder Sterling was concerned about Vincent's character, or lack thereof. That piece of information made me smile. Perhaps this evening would be even more interesting than I'd anticipated. The night of the gala arrived. My stylist came to my penthouse and spent 2 hours on my hair and makeup. The red Valentino gown fit perfectly, hugging every curve before flowing to the floor in a waterfall of crimson silk. I chose diamond earrings and a matching bracelet from my collection, understated but unmistakably real. When I looked in the mirror, I saw exactly what I'd intended: power, wealth, and confidence embodied in red silk and diamonds. George called me one last time before I left. "Miss Isabella, are you absolutely certain about this?" "George, trust me. Tonight, Vincent Sterling is going to learn who he really insulted." My private car pulled up to the Sterling Hotel at exactly 8 o'clock. The valets looked confused when my limousine arrived. They were clearly expecting luxury vehicles, but perhaps not one arriving for someone they'd been told was just a waitress. Security checked my invitation twice, examining it under a light like they suspected it might be forged. I waited patiently, my expression serene, until they finally nodded and stepped aside. The grand ballroom doors opened in front of me, and I took a breath. This was it. The orchestra was playing something classical and beautiful. The room was filled with at least 200 guests, all dressed in designer everything, all dripping with jewelry and confidence and inherited wealth. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow prisms across the marble floor. Champagne flowed like water. It was exactly the kind of scene Vincent Sterling thought someone like me could never belong to. I stepped inside. For a moment, nothing happened. The orchestra continued playing, people continued talking, the world continued spinning. Then someone near the door noticed me. Their conversation stopped mid-sentence. They turned to look. The person they were talking to turned as well. Like dominoes falling, the silence spread through the room. Conversations died. Champagne glasses paused halfway to lips. Heads turned. Eyes widened. I walked forward slowly, my heels clicking on the marble floor, my red gown catching every light in the room. The silence followed me like a wave. By the time I'd taken 10 steps into the ballroom, every single person was staring at me. The orchestra played on, seemingly unaware of the dramatic shift in the room's energy, but every guest had stopped whatever they were doing to watch this woman in red walk across their exclusive territory. I spotted Vincent standing near the center of the room with a circle of his elite friends, all of them holding champagne and laughing about something. I watched as someone touched his arm and nodded in my direction. He turned, glass halfway to his lips, and his eyes landed on me. I saw the exact moment recognition hit him. His champagne glass tilted dangerously. His mouth opened slightly. His face went through several expressions in rapid succession: confusion, recognition, shock, and finally anger. That's the waitress?" I heard him say, his voice carrying in the unusual silence. One of his friends whispered back, "Who is she?" I continued walking until I was standing about 10 feet from their circle. Several guests had started whispering now, the silence breaking into a buzz of confused conversation. Who was I? Where had I come from? How did a waitress afford a gown like that? The questions rippled through the room like electricity. Vincent excused himself from his group and walked toward me, trying to compose his features into something resembling control. But I could see the uncertainty in his eyes, the confusion at seeing me here, looking like this, carrying myself with the kind of confidence that his money couldn't shake. "Well, well," he said, his tone condescending but lacking its usual certainty. "You actually came. I'm impressed." He looked me up and down with exaggerated slowness. "Though that dress must have cost you a year's salary. Rent it for the evening, did you?" I smiled sweetly. Something like that. His friends gathered around us now, sensing entertainment. One of them, a blonde woman dripping in sapphires, laughed. "Oh, Vincent, she's playing dress-up for the evening. How adorable!" Another added, "Did you borrow that from someone's closet?" "It's a good replica, I'll give you that." I stood there, calm and unbothered, which only seemed to confuse them more. People who are genuinely out of their depth usually show it. Nervousness, awkwardness, imposter syndrome. I showed none of those things, and it was clearly throwing off their script. Vincent seemed to decide to move forward with his plan regardless. He turned to address the room, his voice rising. "Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please?" The orchestra stopped playing. Every conversation ceased. All eyes turned to where we stood. "I'd like to introduce someone special this evening," Vincent continued, a cruel smile playing at his lips. "This is Isabella. Some of you might recognize her. She serves tables at La Perla restaurant downtown." There was scattered, uncomfortable laughter. Some guests looked genuinely embarrassed for me. Others leaned in with interest, ready for the show. "She had a little accident last week," Vincent went on. "Spilled food all over me, actually. Completely ruined a very expensive shirt." More laughter, louder now. But I'm a believer in second chances, in giving back, in showing that everyone deserves an opportunity to see how the other half lives. So I invited her here tonight. He turned to me, his smile widening. "Tell us, Isabella, how does it feel to be among real success? To see what life looks like when you actually make something of yourself?" His friends were snickering now. Some guests had turned away, clearly uncomfortable with what was happening. But many others watched with that particular fascination people have for public humiliation, grateful it's not them, curious to see how far it will go. "You see," Vincent continued, addressing the crowd again, "I believe in giving back, even to people who—" "That's enough, Vincent!" The voice boomed across the ballroom with such authority that everyone jumped. I turned to see Harold Sterling, Vincent's father, walking toward us with long, purposeful strides. His face was set in an expression of deep disappointment, and something else, something that looked almost like satisfaction, like a man who'd been waiting for exactly this moment. The room fell into a silence so complete you could have heard a pin drop. Harold Sterling climbed the 3 steps to the raised platform where Vincent and I stood. He looked at me, and something passed between us, an understanding perhaps. Then he turned to his son. "Vincent, do you have any idea who you're speaking to?" Vincent's confident smile faltered. "Dad, what are you doing? I'm just—" "Do you?" Harold's voice was sharp enough to cut glass. She's just a waitress from—" "This," Harold said, turning to address the entire ballroom, "is Isabella Hartwell." I watched as the name registered with people. Gasps echoed through the room. Whispers exploded like fireworks. Someone's champagne glass actually slipped from their fingers and shattered on the marble floor. "Isabella Hartwell," Harold continued, his voice carrying to every corner of the silent ballroom, "owner of the Hartwell Investment Group. Net worth, $2.3 billion. He paused to let that sink in. "She owns La Perla, the restaurant where your son treated her with such contempt. She also owns 12 other restaurants across the country. And Vincent—" Harold turned to his son, whose face had gone absolutely white. "She owns this hotel. The very building we're standing in right now belongs to Miss Hartwell." The room erupted. Gasps turned to exclamations. People pulled out their phones, presumably to look me up, to verify what they'd just heard. Vincent stood frozen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. His friends had backed away from him, suddenly very interested in the floor. Harold turned to me. "Miss Hartwell, I owe you an apology on behalf of my family." This was the part I hadn't expected. "Mr. Sterling, please, let me finish." He faced the crowd again. "I've known about Miss Hartwell's experiment, shall we call it, for a few months now. Your manager, George, is an old friend of mine. When I learned what my son had done to you at your own restaurant, I was ashamed, deeply ashamed." "Dad, you knew?" Vincent's voice was barely a whisper. Harold ignored him. "I asked Miss Hartwell to attend tonight. Not as Vincent's guest, but as mine. I wanted to see what my son would do, whether he'd learned anything, whether he had any character beneath the privilege I've given him. He turned to Vincent, and the disappointment in his eyes was crushing. "You failed, son. Spectacularly." "I didn't know!" Vincent's voice rose desperately. "How was I supposed to know she was—" "That's exactly the problem!" Harold's voice thundered through the ballroom. "You should treat everyone with respect, not just people you think are important, not just people who can benefit you. Everyone, Vincent. Every single person you meet deserves basic human dignity." I watched as Vincent's world crumbled around him. His friends wouldn't meet his eyes. The guests were whispering, many nodding in agreement with Harold's words. Some were looking at me with new interest, with respect, with curiosity about the billionaire who served tables in her own restaurant. Harold gestured for me to take the microphone. I accepted it, looking out over the sea of faces. People who, just 10 minutes ago, had been ready to laugh at my humiliation. Now they waited to hear what I would say. "Thank you, Mr. Sterling," I began, my voice steady and clear. "I work in my own restaurant because I never want to forget where I came from. I grew up with nothing. I slept in shelters. I wore donated clothes. I went to bed hungry more nights than I can count. Every dollar I have now, I earned myself. No inheritance, no trust fund, no family connections, just hard work and smart decisions." The room was absolutely silent, hanging on every word. I served tables at La Perla to remind myself that every person has dignity, every job matters, every human being deserves respect, regardless of what they wear or where they work or how much money is in their bank account. I turned to Vincent. "You called me worthless. You threw a napkin at my face. You said I didn't deserve to breathe the same air as you. You wanted to sue me, to ruin my life, to make sure I never worked again." Vincent was trembling now, whether from anger or shame or fear, I couldn't tell. "But here's what you don't understand, Vincent." I stepped closer to him. "My worth isn't determined by my job title or my bank balance. It's determined by how I treat others, by whether I lift people up or tear them down, by whether I see humanity in everyone I meet or only in people who can serve my interests." I paused, letting my words sink in. "And by that measure," I looked him directly in the eyes, "you're the poorest person in this room." The ballroom erupted in applause. It started with a few people and grew into a thunderous ovation. Guests who'd been ready to laugh at me 10 minutes ago were now clapping for the lesson I'd just delivered. I saw several people wiping their eyes. Even the orchestra members were applauding. Harold took the microphone back. "Vincent, effective immediately, you're removed from all leadership positions in the Sterling companies." "What?" Vincent's voice cracked. "Dad, you can't. You'll start at the bottom like Miss Hartwell did. You'll work in our hotels, as staff, housekeeping, front desk, wherever we need you. Maybe then you'll learn what real work looks like. Maybe then you'll learn what respect means." Vincent looked around desperately, searching for support, for allies, for anyone who would speak up for him, but his friends had disappeared into the crowd. The guests who'd laughed at his jokes earlier now looked at him with a mixture of pity and disgust. He was alone in a room full of people, and that loneliness was entirely of his own making. I handed the microphone back to Harold and prepared to leave. I'd said what I needed to say. The lesson had been delivered. There was nothing more for me to do here. "Miss Hartwell," Harold caught my arm gently as I turned to go. "I hope you'll accept my sincere apology. And perhaps, would you consider a partnership? The Sterling Foundation could benefit greatly from your wisdom and perspective." I considered him for a moment. Harold Sterling was nothing like his son. He'd orchestrated this entire evening not to humiliate me, but to teach Vincent a lesson his father had clearly been trying to teach him for years. There was integrity in that. "Let's talk next week," I said. "I think we might be able to do some good work together." He smiled with genuine warmth. I'd like that very much. As I walked toward the exit, guests parted to let me through. Many approached to introduce themselves, not with the condescension they'd shown earlier, but with genuine respect. They wanted to know about my business, my philosophy, my story. Several handed me cards, suggesting lunch meetings and potential partnerships. The same people who'd been ready to laugh at the poor waitress now couldn't wait to be associated with the self-made billionaire. I glanced back once before leaving the ballroom. Vincent stood alone on the platform where he'd planned my humiliation, his face a mask of shock and defeat. His father had moved away to speak with other guests. The orchestra had started playing again. The party continued as if the dramatic scene had never happened, as if Vincent Sterling hadn't just been publicly dismantled in front of everyone he'd tried to impress. In my car, pulling away from the Sterling Hotel, my hotel, I let out a long breath. The city lights blurred past the window as my driver navigated the streets. I thought about Vincent's face when he realized who I was. I thought about Harold's disappointment in his son. I thought about all the guests who'd witnessed everything. But mostly, I thought about why I'd done this. Not for revenge, though I won't lie and say there wasn't satisfaction in it. Not for money or business connections, though those might come. I did it because someone needed to show Vincent Sterling that his wealth didn't make him better than anyone else, that his money couldn't protect him from the consequences of treating people like they were beneath him, that the waitress serving his coffee might be the CEO he's trying to impress, and that everyone deserves to be treated with basic human respect. People always ask me why I hide my success, why I work as a waitress in my own restaurant when I could be doing anything else. Tonight was exactly why. Money doesn't change who people are. It reveals them. It strips away the polite masks we wear and shows what's underneath. Vincent Sterling's money revealed cruelty, entitlement, and a complete lack of empathy. Harold Sterling's money revealed integrity, accountability, and a desire to make things right. My money? I hope it revealed that success doesn't have to mean forgetting where you came from or who you are at your core. That night taught everyone in that ballroom a lesson they won't soon forget. Never judge someone by their appearance or their job. The waitress clearing your table might own the restaurant you're dining in. The janitor mopping the floor might own the building you work in. And even if they don't, even if they're exactly what they appear to be, they still deserve your respect. They still have dignity. They still matter. Vincent Sterling learned that the hard way, and his father learned that wealth means nothing if your children have no character. As for me, I learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's simply letting someone reveal their true self and stepping aside to let the consequences unfold. If this story moved you, if it made you think differently about how we treat others, then please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever been underestimated? How did you prove them wrong? And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories about justice, karma, and the moments that change everything. Remember, respect costs nothing, but the lack of it can cost everything. Treat the janitor with the same respect you'd give a CEO because you never know who you're really talking to. And even if you do know, they deserve that respect anyway. Until next time, I'm Isabella, reminding you that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, it's measured in character. Thank you for listening to my story.